I recently shared a recipe for a magic coconut pie, and it was a hit. Although some may not like coconut or be allergic. Sandy, I'm talking to you. So I figured I had to come up with another kind of pie for those who aren't interested in coconut or can't have it. Enter my magic chocolate peanut butter pie. Just as tasty as the other and easy to make. I'll be whirring it up in a blender, but if you don't have a blender, don't worry. I'll let you know how you can do it without a blender. So if you want to see how this is made, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook, an amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is one of mine, shocker. I decided when I made the coconut pie, the magic coconut pie a couple of weeks ago, that I wanted to make other versions. One of my favorite flavor combinations is chocolate and peanut butter. And as you saw from the thumbnail, that's what I was working on. That's what I've come up with. There were a few subtle changes that I had to make to the original recipe to make this work. Another thing that I changed up is this time we're doing it all in the blender. Someone had commented on the previous video that their mother used to make this, just put everything in the blender and go. So I thought, well, that's going to be convenient. So I did add a little section on the coconut pie on how to do it with the coconut pie. Because of the coconut, it will be a little different unless you want a very fine texture on your coconut. But that is in the coconut pie recipe now, how to do it with a blender. We're going to be doing this in a blender, so this is going to come together so quick, and it's going to be so good, so creamy, and so flavorful. So let's go over the ingredients. Here I have, of course, my cooking spray. I have a 9.5-inch pie plate. In the recipe, it does say 9-inch, but 9.5. It's going to be about the same difference, so you don't have to worry too much about if it's a half an inch bigger. But 9-inch would be just fine. Here I have 4 eggs at room temperature. Now, because we're doing this in the blender, it's not as big of a deal for it to be at room temperature, but I do like the fact that everything's at room temperature. It's all going to come together more smoothly, and I don't have to overwork it in the blender. So I prefer having everything at room temperature, but if you don't, I'm sure you can get by. But I do think it works out better if they are. Here I have a half a cup of flour, and again, that's going to be the magic portion of this. It's going to be what helps hold this all together so that we don't have to add a crust. That would add a lot of bites, points, calories, and macros we don't need. Here I have 1/2 cup of almond milk and 1/2 cup of non-fat Greek yogurt, plain non-fat Greek yogurt. You could use the vanilla, but it may alter the bites, points, and calories. But those are, of course, at room temperature, just because I want this to blend together more easily. Here I have 1/4 cup of light butter. Now, I use the I Can't Believe It's Not Butter Light, which is 1 bite or point per tablespoon. What we are going to do is we are going to heat that up and melt it down. You want it melted, but then slightly cooled so it's not too hot. And I will show you again the little trick and how to do that so you don't really have to wait very long. Here I have 1/2 cup of brown sugar replacement. Now I like the flavor that it gives to this pie, but if you wanted to use regular granulated, that's fine as well. Here I have 1/4 cup of powdered peanut butter. I'm using PB2, PB Fit, whatever powdered peanut butter you use is fine. Here I have 2 tablespoons of sugar-free maple syrup. Now you may be wondering why I have the maple syrup if I also have the brown sugar replacement. Having too much of the sugar replacement in the original recipe that I tried, it didn't all melt down enough and it got a little gritty. So I reduced the sugar and added sugar-free maple syrup to get a little more liquid sugar in there. So you could, if you didn't want to use the sugar-free maple syrup, say you don't have any, you don't want to buy any, You could increase the sugar to 2/3 cup, and that will be in the recipe. Here I have 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. Now in the original version, I actually used 3 tablespoons of the unsweetened cocoa powder and 3 tablespoons of the peanut butter. The chocolate was overwhelming, too chocolatey for what I was going for, and the peanut butter was kind of hidden by it. So I took 1 tablespoon away from the unsweetened cocoa powder and added it to the peanut butter. But if you wanted a more chocolatey version, you could do 3 tablespoons of each. But I honestly think that this ratio, and Paul and my brother Dan, they both tried it and they both agreed, it is perfectly balanced just the way it is. But you do you. Here I have 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Those are going to be mixed in with the flour. These were based on a Bisquick recipe where it was like the baking mix. So that's going to approximate the baking mix by adding that in with the flour. And I have 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. That just enhances the other flavors. You really don't get a vanilla flavor from it. It just kind of boosts everything from the background. All right, so those are all of the ingredients. Let me just shuffle a few things around and we're gonna get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to throw the light butter into the microwave for just about 30 seconds. And then it's going to leave some of the butter still as a whole. And that's what you want, because what you want to do is then mix that intact butter into the liquid butter. And that's going to help the liquid to cool down and the lump of butter that is left to melt. So give me 1 second to get this microwaved. All right, so I have my butter microwaved. Before I stir that butter in, because I want to use the same fork, I don't want to have too many forks dirtied, I'm going to take my flour, add in the baking powder and the salt, whisk that quickly together. You just want to get that distributed throughout the flour so that there are no pockets of salt or baking powder, etc. It only takes 10-15 seconds to do that. Set that aside, bring in my butter, and you can see there's still butter in there. Just going to keep whisking until that butter melts into the liquid. And that looks good right there. I'm going to set this aside. Let me bring in my blender. So I have my blender here. I have my pie plate, and it has been sprayed with cooking spray, and it is sitting on a baking sheet because this is going to be very liquid. And when I'm traveling to the oven with it, I really don't want to spill it, especially with my hands sometimes being as shaky as they are. I could get into trouble, but I think for anybody, it's just a good idea to have it on a baking sheet just because there could be some spillage. What I'm going to do is take all of my wet ingredients and put those into the blender first. The eggs, maple syrup, almond milk, Greek yogurt, melted butter, the brown sugar replacement, and the vanilla. And yes, as I've mentioned in other videos, the sugar replacement, sugar is often considered a wet ingredient because it will incorporate itself into the wet mixture. Whereas if you added flour, it would make a totally different mixture altogether. So often you will add the sugar in with the wet ingredients. But now we're just going to take our lid, put that on securely. We're just going to blend this for about 15 seconds. So it's going to go pretty quickly. So it's been 15 seconds. What I'm going to do is just scrape down the edges of the blender carafe here just to make sure nothing is sticking to the sides. Then I want to add in the powdered peanut butter and the cocoa powder. Now the reason I'm not adding in the flour with those 2 ingredients is because you really don't want to process flour too much or your products will get tough, kind of like a bread rather than a pie or a cake or what have you. So I'm going to blend these 2 items in first and then add the flour. And this will just take about 10 seconds. So it's 10 seconds. Just going to do the same thing. Just scrape down the edges of the carafe just in case any of the powdered peanut butter or cocoa got stuck against the sides. Now, last step, we're just going to add in our flour mixture. And this time we're going to go for about 10 to 15 seconds just to make sure that it's fully incorporated into the wet mixture. Okay, 15 seconds and that is done. That's all there is to making this pie. So what I'm going to do is move this aside and bring in my pie plate. Smells good. I just got a waft of it as it passed by my nose. Smells so good. All right, so before I do empty that into the pie dish, I do want to scrape down the sides just in case any of the flour didn't get fully incorporated. And now just pour our mixture, our pie mixture, right into our pie plate. And make sure you get every bit of that goodness out. If you're paying the bites, points, calories, etc. for it, get everything you can out of it. Now, this is going to go into a 350-degree oven for about 40 to 45 minutes. What's going to happen is you'll see the outer edge start to dome up a little bit, and then the center will slowly try to reach that same level. It won't fully, but you do want to make sure that there is no jiggling or no wetness in the center to tell that it's done. Just stick a toothpick in the middle, comes out clean, you're fine. So 40 to 45 minutes in a 350-degree oven, and I'll be back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. The magic chocolate peanut butter pie. You can see that the edges here are domed up, like I said. The middle came up a little bit, but it's not going to match that. What is going to happen is as it cools, that is going to sink down, and these edges at the end are going to form almost like our crust. So it's a little bit of kitchen magic, and now you know the secret. But we do have to wait now. I'm going to remove it from the sheet pan because I want this to cool down, and being on the hot sheet pan is not going to help it to cool any faster. So now I'm going to let this cool to room temperature. And just like with the coconut pie, you could eat it then. But I think the texture is much better after it's been covered and refrigerated for at least 2 hours. So that is what I recommend, but you do as you want to do. I'm going to let this cool. I'm going to cover it, plastic wrap, set it in the fridge for a couple of hours, and I'll be back to show you the final result. All right, so we are back, and I have had this cooling first at room temperature about an hour, maybe a little bit more. Then I put it into the fridge covered with plastic wrap for another 2 hours or so. And you do want to make sure that you cover this with plastic wrap or something when you put it in the fridge, because it will develop kind of like a skin. You know how like pudding can sometimes get that skin if you don't cover it. We don't have to worry about that because it's been covered. And I've already cut it up into 8 portions. So let me show you. This is what you would be getting for 1 serving of this pie. Look at the texture of that. I don't know if you can see how creamy and thick that is. So good. But you don't want to just know how good it is, do you? You want to know those nutrition facts. So let me give them to you. For 1 portion, as I have here, serving 8, this is only going to be 2 Better Balance bites or Old Blue points. I am on the Healthy Better Balance plan, which is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, which is about where their current points plan is. It might be 1 or 2 bites or points up or down, depending on changes that they've made to individual ingredients. But just 2 bites for a delicious dessert. Now, if you're following calories, the calories for 1/8 of this pie is only 114. And if you are following macros, the fat would be 5.3 grams. Saturated fat would be 1.4 grams. Protein would be 7.2 grams. Carbs would be 21.6 grams. Fiber would be 1 gram. And sugars would be 1.2 grams, as I've made it here. Now, I did want to mention that if you needed to up your protein, say, you could replace the cocoa powder or the peanut butter powder for protein powder, a flavored protein powder, and mix that in. Also, if you don't have a blender, you don't have to worry about it. Just use a hand mixer and do it in the same order that I did it. All the wet ingredients, then the cocoa and peanut butter, and then the flour last. Or whisk it. If you want to get a little workout in, do a little whisking. You can make this even without a blender. Now, I hope that you enjoyed this video and this recipe, and if you did, I'd appreciate you doing the usual. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. We do have a collab coming up and it's going to be for quick weeknight dinners. With school having started, I'm sure those will come in handy. Also, I did want to mention a new feature you may have spotted underneath this video. I now will have a banner of recipes with Roy gear items. There are t-shirts, there are aprons, of course, there's sweatshirts, there's drinking glasses and coffee cups, notebooks. So check out those, and if you can support the channel by purchasing a little item, I would appreciate it. Also down there, you are of course going to find the recipe for this delicious pie. I will link directly to that recipe down below, as well as to the blog itself. Also down there, you will find links to my Amazon storefront, to my Built Bar rewards, Fetch rewards, and my social media, of course, my Instagram, and 3 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out that description box for all sorts of information, and don't forget to check out my store. All right, so it is time for me to go and find a fork so I can have some of this delicious creamy pie. And I hope that you'll be doing the same yourself very soon. So until next time, bye.